Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 93. Sorry, guys. I don't have any guests this week by the looks of it, which doesn't surprise me because my Discord has been behaving like a load of schoolboys all day. So there we go. As always, I'm going to start us off with a tune. Which one do I want?
Hark now the drums beat off again, for all true soldier gentlemen, then let us list and march, I say, over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, to Flanders, Portugal and Spain. Queen Anne commands and we'll obey, over the hills and far away. All gentlemen that have a mind to serve the Queen that's good and kind, come list and enter into pay, then o'er the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, to Flanders, Portugal and Spain. Queen Anne commands and we'll obey, over the hills and far away. No more from sound of drum retreat, while Marlborough and Galway beat the French and Spaniards every day, when over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, to Flanders, Portugal and Spain. Queen Anne commands and we'll obey, over the hills and far away.
And that was, of course, Over the Hills and Far Away in the original War of the Spanish Succession version, which is what they're talking about Marlborough. All right, guys, I don't have any guests this week. Like I said, my Discord's been behaving like idiot schoolboys all day as far as I'm concerned, so it doesn't really surprise me. I'm going to do a bit of an AMA. You can ask me anything you like. I'll try and do my best to answer, and I'm also going to talk about a few things which came up in the Discord today. The first thing that came up in the Discord today is not punching right. Well, do you know what? I don't punch right these days. You won't hear me slagging off other people on the right, even if I don't agree with their positions. That doesn't mean I won't speak in my little closed Discord, which is a closed Discord by invitation only. I won't speak fairly freely there because I assume I'm talking to people on my side, but I sometimes wonder about that, to be honest with you. So yeah, that was the first thing that started going on today. And then I've been attacked on both sides on my Discord today for being not in favour enough of Anglo-Saxon people, and B, being too in favour of Anglo-Saxon people from two different sides, of course, from two different people. So maybe I'm about right, I don't know. But my position is still my position. The thing that causes me the most grief is that I make a one singular exception for the British Army Royal Gurkha Rifles. I consider them to be honorary British people. And that is the one and only exception I make. No others, just them. Because of 200 years of blood and shared danger. And I do make an exception for those guys, and I'm not going to change my opinion on that for anybody. But it is the only exception I make. I don't include anybody else, you know. So there we go. So that's the thing I get the most shit for in my Discord at the moment. From really, to be fair, only from one person. But there we go. So yeah, there's that. Then I did a stream with Red Hawk earlier in the week, and I advised young men not to join the British Army, or for that matter, the American, Australian, Canadian Army or Navy or Air Force. And I've got to say, it pained me greatly to have to do that. And I did it purely because I believe that the people in charge of our nations today are traitors to the real people of those nations. I mean, who the hell wants to die for dimwit Liz Truss or senile Biden or whoever controls him in America? I mean, that's what I'm thinking of. Now, I've had people pointing out objections to this. And I will say, particularly in the case of Britain and to a slightly lesser degree Australia, joining the military is one way of learning military skills, including shooting and all that kind of stuff. And from that point of view, yes, it could be useful, I suppose. And I was at one stage tempted to say to people what they should do is join for a very short time. Like, for example, in the British Army, you can sign up for 3 years, which is the shortest time you can sign up for. You can buy yourself out any time during that period, but the minimum is 3 years. And I suppose you could argue that might be a way to go. My problem is that because the British Armed Forces, in common with the American Armed Forces and the Australian Armed Forces and Canada and all the rest of it, are so thoroughly infested with globo homo and feminism and woke shit at the top, as in the very senior officers who control things. Because they're so infested with that stuff, I wonder these days if a young man who goes into the military aged 18, 19, 20 will actually be better when he comes out. Yeah, so I don't know. Baron Badger in the chat says you can't buy yourself out these days. Well, maybe you can't, but I'd be surprised if that was the case. But maybe you can't. You always were able to in the British Army. It was more difficult than they used to pretend, but you could do. But if that's the case, okay, that's the case. I mean, recruitment is way down anyway in Britain and America because, you know, people see things in the same way that I do. That why are we going to go and fight and die for these regimes that are doing nothing that we agree with? I mean, the American government at the moment seems entirely obsessed with trying to go to war with Russia and China at the same time, which is insanity, as far as I'm concerned. But, you know, whatever. The Laureate says if you're not sure, join the Territorial Army. Yeah, there is that. But also, if you join the Territorial Army these days, the rules have now changed, and then they can send you overseas in a heartbeat. So just be aware of that. And like I say, look, I wish I could recommend to young men to go and join the British Army. All my family were British soldiers, like my father was, my grandfather was, my great-grandfather was, my great-great-grandfather was. My son is serving in the Royal Navy as we speak. So trust me, it's not my wish to advise people not to join the British Armed Forces. I just don't believe that. Yeah, I know there's 800 people watching Joel Davis' stream, and who's he got on there? Is that the Mark Collette and Grinder Greg Johnson stream? Puff Wagon? Is that the one? And do you know where Grinder Greg got his nickname from? by the way. No doubt he's trying to bumfuck his way to white purity. There you go, I did punch through it. So there we go. Yeah, Baron Badger, I would recommend the Royal Navy all the investments in the fleet now. Look, my son's in the Royal Navy, but I tell you, mate, if it kicks off over Taiwan, then the Royal Navy are going to be deeply involved in that. Whoever wins, it's going to be very bloody. A sea and air war in the South China Sea would be very bloody for both sides. So I don't know. Well, Aquila Tempstate in the chat, I am often accused of being a Russia simp. And I don't think they're bloody fools at all. And I'm not a Russia simp. I just don't like Ukraine. And the globo homo that is supporting Ukraine. Like almost everyone I detest supports Ukraine. Have a look at that. Baron Badger, what new submarine fleet project are you talking about in Australia? Because, yeah, that's a big project, which is probably not going to show any results into the 2030s, which I suspect might be a bit late, but we will see. If you're talking about the Royal Navy, then there isn't a massive submarine fleet project. There's a replacement for the boomers, the submarines that carry the nuclear missiles. They're being replaced. But because of that, there's actually no capacity in Britain to build up a submarine fleet. There's no spare docks to build them in, or the trained, skilled people to build the submarines. All I would say to people who go on about Russia simps and all the rest of it is just consider who supports Ukraine. It's everyone we hate on the right. Everyone we hate and detest on the right supports Ukraine. And I've heard people on that debate were going on about sovereignty and so on. I don't remember anyone being all that concerned about the sovereignty of Afghanistan or Iraq or Libya or even, for that matter, Serbia. Sailaway says surface ships are known as targets by submariners. Yes, they are, but also there are surface ships and helicopters that can be very dangerous to submarines, and particularly if you're not the latest top-of-the-line submarine. For example, Chinese submarines are a weakness that they have. Their submarines are not very good. They're not very quiet, which is the main thing a submarine needs to be in order not to get seen and sunk. But yeah, NATO has expanded eastwards for years now, despite promising originally not to do so. And eventually the Russians reacted, having warned NATO and the West that if they didn't stop, there was going to be action. And then they did what they said they were going to do. And despite what you hear on the British and Western mainstream media, which can't even lie straight in bed, it is a true fact that Russia is winning the war and will win the war. The West is actually just about out of weapons to send to Ukraine. Baron Badger says China produces a destroyer a month. Well, they produce a warship a month, which is a bit more accurate. A lot of them are frigates and corvettes rather than destroyers. How good they are and how good their crews are is a different matter. I mean, China hasn't won a war in several hundred years, to the best of my knowledge. And they haven't fought one for an awful long time, but, we'll see. I think it's foolish to push for a war in China while Ukraine's going on. And I tell you, if a shooting war starts in the South China Sea at the same time as the Israel thing, as the Ukraine thing is going on, the world will be very lucky to get away without a nuclear war. If a shooting war also starts in the South China Sea at the same time as the Russians and Ukrainians are fighting. Aquila Temper State says that China, Russia, and Israel are all in bed together. Crap, mate. Sorry. Absolute nonsense. That is real shit. If you think that, you're a damn fool, mate, honestly, because the only people Israel is in bed with is the Americans for the most part. But there we go. And by the way, I don't like the Chinese Communist Party at all. Whilst I am neutral about Russia, like I don't care who runs Ukraine really at the end of the day. I don't think it's a vital British interest. I don't even think it's a vital American interest who runs Ukraine at the end of the day. So I'm neutral on Russia, but I don't like the Chinese Communist Party one tiny little bit because I don't like commies. So, you know, I just think there's a lot of twisted and fake thinking on the right about the Russia-Ukraine thing. And also China. I mean, I see people on the right trying to say, oh, yeah, China's our friend. No, they ain't. Never will be either. The tech is being leaked from the US and West to China and Russia. Yeah, all right, maybe it is. But although actually the Americans have just banned sending semiconductors to anywhere on mainland China. But, you know, I think that's again an idiot move that is just going to push China into trying to invade Taiwan. And like I said, if a shooting war starts in the South China Sea at the same time as Ukraine is still going on, the whole world will be lucky to get away without a nuclear war, which will kill most people in the world. You can't win a nuclear war, boys. You can't fight one. As soon as those missiles start flying, most of us are going to die. George in the chat, did I hear about Braverman being circumnavigated so that Truss can increase immigration laws? Yes, I did see that, yes. Look, Liz Truss is a dimwit as far as I'm concerned. She's a figurehead. I think the backroom boys in the Conservative Party really wanted Sunak, but the ordinary members of the Conservative Party wouldn't vote for Sunak. And I think they're now manoeuvring in the background to replace Truss with Sunak. Now, to be honest, I don't think there'll be much difference between Sunak and Truss. I think they're equal. Both of them are equally bad. So, you know, I mean, Truss is a Remainer from the Brexit days. So is a new Chancellor of the Exchequer. He's another Remainer. Truss, I think, would take us back into the EU in a heartbeat if she could. Don't like her, don't trust her. Got no reason to like her or trust her. And in any case, the Conservatives are going to get wiped out in 2 years' time when they have to have an election. They're absolutely going to be destroyed. Now, what I was going to talk about on this stream this evening, had I had any guests, was the growing sense of crisis in the West. The growing sense of crisis in the West. I think, you know, the Ukraine war and the insanity of people like Truss and Biden and whoever controls Biden and Truss is one part of it. There's the largely self-inflicted energy crisis that the Europe and Britain is suffering. There's the ever-increasing inflation, which people are trying to pretend isn't there, but certainly is. That is eroding savings and making people on fixed incomes like pensioners in the UK have a real problem. There's also the fact that the UK economy itself is looking increasingly shaky and fragile. Everything from the markets, the bond markets, the share markets, pension funds, all of it's looking really, really bad. Housing market also not looking good in the long term, particularly depending on what happens with interest rates, because, you know, a small increase in interest rates will make a lot of people's mortgages totally unaffordable. And that's also true in countries like Australia as well as in the UK. I just think there's an increasing sense of crisis, and I wonder if this winter might even bring it all crashing down. And if it happens, so long as it's a financial crash and not a nuclear war, do you know what? I don't care, mate. Maybe that's the best thing to happen. It's going to give us years of real nastiness, but we might come out better at the end of it, maybe. At least it would give us a chance, which carrying on the current course will not. Baron Badger, he thinks the economy is being crashed up. Maybe, mate. Maybe. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that, to be honest with you, but maybe. What have we got here? Someone said, yeah, I do agree with that. Aquila Tempest State, the Royal Navy could do with some conventional submarines and could actually build some conventional submarines. For one thing, it would be a good way of training the skippers to then go on to the nuclear-powered hunter killers and so on. But yeah, I'm not against that idea at all. And they would also be useful for home defence around the British Isles. Would Sunak do what? Would he kill the Equality Act and give life to groomers? Well, would he? Exactly. I don't know. If he did, fair enough. I'm hearing rumours that Nigel Farage is probably going to come back into British politics. What do you guys in the chat think of that one? I'm not against it. I mean, you know, he's one guy outside the main parties who could shake things up a bit. What have we got here? I reckon we're at, or slightly before the sack of Rome of 410. I think we're a bit later than that, George, to be honest with you. I think we've already been sacked, to be honest. That's my own opinion, anyway. Sailorway says Farage has controlled opposition. Don't really agree with that, mate, to be honest. I don't. I think he's careful what he says, but I think he's careful what he says on purpose. Because to say some of the things that I think he knows about would get him in trouble. And he knows it. And when I say get him in trouble, it would get him banned off the mainstream media, which is terrible in the West these days. I mean, I just don't understand how anyone can just rely on the mainstream media for their news. If you did, you literally know less than nothing about the world, and half the things you thought you knew would be wrong. Yes, I know he did, George, and since then he said other things. Since that interview he did in the Telegraph a month ago, he has actually said other things. Well, Sailorway, that you can think that if you want. I don't agree with you, but you can certainly think that. That's what Sailorway thinks. Well, that's fine. You can think that. I don't. Aquila Tempestate. I've spent time with Farage and he's a defo performer sociopath. I think most politicians are some sort of sociopath, to tell you the absolute truth of it, mate. If I really want to be honest. Well, there you go. Aquila Tempestate. I can agree with you there, you see. Pedro Garcia, are there any Christian conservative parties in the UK that oppose gay marriage and abortion? I don't think so, to be honest with you. There may be some tiny little nationalist party somewhere that does, but if there are, I don't know. Does anyone in the chat know that? Oh, there you go. George is giving us a Scottish party that does. Apparently the Scottish Family Party opposes all that clever homo shit, like gay marriages and abortions. I'm not totally against abortion, by the way. I mean, in theory, I am totally against abortion, but in practical terms, I think what we should be aiming to try and do is to limit it to 3 months. I think that should be the limit for normal abortions. I'm not saying like someone who's been raped or somebody who's got a really serious medical condition shouldn't be able to have one a bit later than that. But in general terms, it should be 3 months should be the end of it. If you've gone over 3 months and you haven't had an abortion, then you shouldn't be able to get one. What have we got here? Flexo is saying Farage is brilliant, stayed ahead of the curve, achieved what he set out to do, knew what was viable and what wasn't. Yeah, I don't disagree with some of that, Flexo, to be honest with you. I think that's fairly reasonable. Bengal is saying, what would Farage even do? Can't save the economy now that civil servants will let him actually deport anyone. Well, you know, any government that is not going to have an enormous shake-up of the civil service is not going to get anywhere. And I don't know if Farage is even, it's even possible for Farage to become the Prime Minister. All I would like at this stage, to be honest with you, is a pie that was taking people away from the so-called Conservative Party, and that could shake things up. You know, if Farage could get, I don't know, 10 MPs, say, I think that would put enormous pressure on the Conservatives, so-called Conservatives, because most of them are not. I was also talking on my Discord today about, are the Conservative Party going to split? Because I think they could. Because I think the majority of the so-called Conservative Party are not Conservatives at all. They're Lib Dems, basically. They're Lib Dems with socialist tendencies as well. And most of those guys shouldn't be there. But then, as somebody said to me, who I think is actually a member of the Conservative Party, the more likely thing to happen is that 3/4 of the MPs are going to get the sack at the next general election, and you'll get rid of them that way. So, you know, there is that possibility. But I mean, of course, then you've got 5 years of a Labour government, which ain't going to do us any favours. But are they that much worse than the Conservatives today? I don't think there's all that much difference, to be honest. So there's that. Yeah, George, I do believe that has been his strategy, and I think it's been a pretty successful one. Like, he sits at the far end of the Overton window and doesn't go beyond it. And yeah, but I think he's a bit more base than many people realize. Bengal says he doesn't think any of the Conservative MPs are actually Conservative. I think the Conservative Party has about, I don't know, somewhere between 35 and 50 MPs who are actually Conservative, and the rest of them, nah, not at all. And I think, as some people have said on this stream before, who've been guests on here, you've got to look at the actual voting record of your particular MP, because there are about 35 to 50 Conservative MPs who are actually pretty Conservative. The rest of them are not. They don't belong in that party. So, you know, and whether that party splits or whether most of them just get sacked because they lose their seats, something's got to happen about this. There's really got to be something about it. Oh, this is fucking Alexander Johnson, isn't it? Excuse my language, folks. Doris campaigned for the Social Democrats while he was in the Bullingdon Club. Well, yeah, don't surprise me. I think Johnson's problem was he was always more playing than being serious, to be quite honest with you. He got to the top of the greasy pole and then didn't know what to do, as far as I can see. But, you know, it's just me. And, you know, the whole China virus nonsense is increasingly being exposed as the con that I always said it was, and many others always said it was. It's increasingly being exposed. The fact that the vaccines don't stop you catching it, the fact that a lot of people are dying as a result of the vaccines, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and that's being exposed now by people who, at the time, including medical people, actually scored it. But, you know, I can't go too much into that because it's YouTube and this is not a free speech platform at all, sadly. All right, what are we looking at here? Who is the one man who's never betrayed so many? Sail away. Who are you referring to? Ron Paul, although against globalization, Farage is still rather to keep Joseph Thatcherite on economics. Yeah, sure, but, you know, that's relatively base these days. I'm sorry. I mean, I think Thatcher should have done more to protect core British industries, to be honest with you. But compared to like modern British politicians, that's base, really. So the way you were referring to Johnson, yeah, I mean, look, as I said, I think Johnson got to the top of the greasy pole and then didn't know what to do, frankly. Or either that or he wasn't able to impose himself on his government. I don't know what it was, but just complete failure, basically. Ben Gale, what do I think about the rumours of Bojo returning? I think it's very unlikely, frankly. And I think if he ever does return, it will be it won't be as Prime Minister. If he ever does come back to the government, I don't think it will be as Prime Minister. But then again, how anyone who's been Prime Minister could then accept a more junior job in the government, I'm not too sure. I think it would show a lack of self-pride myself, but whatever. Sailorway says, a play on his hero, Churchill. Well, anyone who's been watching my channel on the series I just recently did with Adaman and Horace about Winston Churchill between 1914 and 1942, well, no, I'm no big fan of Winston Churchill. I've been slagged off for that too. Apparently, I shouldn't attack people who are heroes of the ordinary British people, even though they're heroes for no very good reason, to be honest with you. But, whatever. I think what some of it is people think that the public is so thick, you just can't do this stuff. And maybe that's true. Look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the public is as thick as that. I don't think most of them are, but maybe they are. But yeah, all right. So that's a thing too. What are we looking at here? Yep, I see that, no name, and I agree. But like I say, I can't go much on that subject because I'll just the video will get taken down and I'll get a strike from YouTube. That's what they do. There are doctors with university scientific degrees that YouTube just takes down if they tell the truth about this stuff. Well, so the way you should go and watch it, it's a 4-part stream series that you can find on my channel, and I think a lot of people would find it pretty interesting. How far left of Joe Biden is the average Tory MP? I don't know where Joe Biden sits because basically he's just senile, isn't he? Like, I don't know who's running America at the moment, but it sure ain't Joe Biden. As to how far left the average Tory MP of it is from him, I would say most of them are not. But like I said, I think there are somewhere between about 35 and 50 Conservative MPs who are actually Conservative. And there's a lot of Conservative MPs at the moment because Johnson won an enormous majority, which he then completely squandered. What's the look at this? George, ultimately the formula for winning the electorate has to be they don't care about you because that has a broad appeal and can effectively implement popular opinion, whatever that may be. Yeah. And I mean, apart from anything else, it's true. They don't care about you. Britain and the whole of Europe, to be honest, is the political elites are doing stuff against the interests of their own people. And not just over Ukraine. There's going to be loads of old age pensioners in Europe and probably in the UK as well this year who are going to freeze to death. They're going to die of hypothermia because they can't afford to eat their lunch, or there are power cuts. For Ukraine, which everyone knows is one of the most corrupt nations in the entire world, it's a huge center for the sex slave traffic. And it is the biggest center in the world for the babies for cash traffic. Lovely country, Ukraine. And then the other thing that gets me with the riot is who runs Ukraine, by the way? Who's the president? I don't know if anyone noticed that he's a small hat dude who's got joint citizenship in Israel. That's the leader of Ukraine that so many on the right are supporting. It's just beyond me, to be honest. But he does have his own Nazis, which is also okay. So. Oh dear, so funny. Really, really amusing. I like the people don't have the sense they're born with, a lot of people, in my opinion. My humble opinion. Well, that's not all that humble, to be honest. But, So, there's all that going on. There's a good stream I'd like to recommend people to watch on Paleo Anglo-isms channel, which is about the British economy and to a lesser degree about the world globo homo economy and how it's all inevitably going to become crashing down sooner rather than later. I mean, I'm hoping this may even happen over this winter, but I think that's our only way out of it. Dolorious, Slavic Civil War, nothing to do with us. Totally agree, mate. Absolutely agree. Yeah, Dostastic Draso, Stanley Baldwin was Prime Minister 23-24 to 29, joined the coalition government Ramsay MacDonald, although to be fair, the coalition government under Ramsay MacDonald was not really very Labour, to be honest, unlike the one that Churchill led in World War II, which was dominated by socialists. But, George is saying the pie, whatever it is that we decide, has to crucify both the Tories and Labour over the fact they always say one thing and do the opposite. Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all, mate. That would be absolutely common sense. I'm sure a multiracial denazification horde invading Ukraine will make it a better place. Well, look, it's not really multiracial, is it, mate? The Russians are using some of their own Muslims. Yes, they are. But did you know, Aquila Tempstate, that the NATO are paying ex-Al Qaeda and Islamic State fighters, the guys who took all the sex slaves and all this stuff in the Middle East, they're paying those people $1,500 a month or more to go and fight for Ukraine. And I don't know if you've seen all the videos I've seen, but there's an awful lot of brown and black looking people on Ukraine's side in Ukraine, mate. So I won't really go on that one if I was you. Sailorway is saying the British economy is based on immigration. No, it's not. That's the government excuse for immigration is more accurate, to tell you the truth of it. Why can't the Tories stop importing 2 million immigrants a year? Well, they're not importing 2 million, they're importing 1 million, but I mean, I get your point. Franz says, congratulations on 1,000 subscribers. Yeah, I believe we're on about 1,020 or something now. So, yeah, cool. Oh, you're kidding me, George. Jeremy Hunt has appeased them with defence cut plans when the British Armed Forces are entirely inadequate already. And dimwit Liz Truss wants us to take us into a war with Russia and China. Well, that's a good plan. I always think Jeremy Hunt has got a rhyming slang name, which is entirely accurate, but, I've always thought this. Yep, you couldn't make that stuff up. Pedro Garcia, that's because Zelensky has created a new ideology, judo banderas. Oh, well said, mate. Well said. Russia's Muslims are white. Yes, they are. That's true. Franz, you spelled isolation wrong. Mate, I did that, I don't know, 12 hours ago. Totally sober, mate. Did I spell it wrong? I'll change it later. I did too. I can see it now. Sorry, I actually do. I have got that spelling thing where you can't always see words properly. I've always had it. Got diagnosed with it when I was 14, which was many, many years ago. So yes, and I can see it's wrong now. I look at it, but I'll change it later. But I did that stone cold sober like 10 hours ago. I'm not stone cold sober now. Dyslexia, yes, George. I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was 14. And so I didn't see it, but I will change it. Yeah, I'll probably do something special for episode 100. I've also got an Agincourt Day stream coming up next week. I think it's next week or week after, 25th, I think, is it? But yeah. Defense is always the only thing they always cut. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, there's nothing left to cut in British defense. I mean, the Royal Navy has 17 destroyers and frigates. At the time of the Falklands War in 1982, the Royal Navy had over 80 destroyers and frigates. 80. Now we have 17. There's nothing left to cut. Whoa, it's ridiculous. Yeah, and apart from anything else, GDP is a stupid and crazy and rubbish way of measuring real wealth, because it doesn't measure real wealth at all. I know Joe Gibbs. Well, I mean, I don't know him personally, but I know of him on YouTube. He's got a good YouTube channel, and he's been involved in a lot of stuff. He's been involved in a lot of stuff where they've been trying to do like recreations of working out how good longbows were against armor at the time of Agincourt in 1415 and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, Joe Gibbs is excellent. Do go and check out his channel. And if you look at Joe Gibbs, who's probably the leading English warbow archer of today, if you look at him, just imagine having 5,000 of those dudes on your side, because English archers weren't just bowmen. They were quite capable of fighting in melee actions hand to hand as well. Like, in order to be an English bowman on the Agincourt campaign, you had to have a buckler, which was a small shield. You had to have a helmet, and you had to have a sword, at least. And quite a lot of the archers had a bit more armor than that. They were fully capable of fighting hand to hand as well. To be a good warbowman, you were a broad, strong chap. So yeah. I don't know. I mean, the idea that Truss is going to do defense cuts is just amusing to me. I just can't even understand that. What are they going to cut, for fuck's sake? There's nothing left. Oh, dear God. It's so pathetic. I mean, the whole British Army is under 80. I mean, it's supposed to be 82,000 strong at the moment, but I think it's actually more like 78,000 because they can't recruit anyone. Like Ukraine has had more soldiers killed and wounded than the whole of the British Army and Royal Marines and all their reserves put together. Completely wiped out. Yeah, mate. 66 million a year on translation services for the NHS. I mean, there's money well spent, eh? I mean, I'd get rid of the NHS totally anyway. I would leave a small safety net for people who really had no money, and that's all I'd do. Liz Truss is a dimwit, George. Liz Truss might have made a very average primary school teacher. Prime Minister material, she is not. And had she been, say, my son, when he was little's primary school teacher, I wouldn't have taken the slightest bit of notice of her, which seems to be what everyone's doing now she's Prime Minister. But, there we go. I didn't see this because I try not to watch Conservative conferences anymore. Did I see the interview where he said that it was better to have less but operational ships than lots of ships that aren't? But that's not the way it works. Basically, for any navy, for every 3 ships you have 1 operational all the time and 2 some of the time. That's always the way it works. It's just inevitable because of refits and maintenance work and all this kind of stuff. Every 3 ships you have mean you have always 1 available, and sometimes you have 2. And we just saw a big example of that with the carrier HMS Prince of Wales breaking down, and we only had 1 other ship which was supposed to go somewhere else, but then had to go and replace Prince of Wales off the American coast. Had we had 3, we could have done what we needed, but they didn't build 3, even though the British people, the taxpayers, paid for 3 carriers because the Labour Party under Blair and Brown built them so slowly that they cost as much as 3 would have done had they been built at the right pace. But, there we go. The British government, no British government, certainly since the 1980s and really since before World War II, has ever had any sense about defense. None whatsoever. George, do you know what? I don't know, mate, but one thing I have learned in my life, and like I'm 57, I'm not a teenager. One thing I've learned in my life is never ever confuse education with intelligence, because they are not the same thing at all. Singapore healthcare model looks workable. Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about it, but yeah, Singapore has some fairly base stuff going on there, but you've got to remember it's basically a city-state. So, yeah. Yeah, that nonsense has been said for years, Puffwagon. I don't think it's really very true, but it's been claimed for years. Okay. Oh, hang on. Speak among yourselves for a couple of seconds, guys, because I've got to find a tune I need to play. Yes. Okay. What are we looking at here? Australian Navy is just as bad. Are you talking about in terms of being not big enough? Yeah, for sure. Laureus. Yeah, I was in the British Army, and yeah, we used to take piss out of the Navy, but it's not really true, in all honesty. Yeah, the coupling on her, one of her propellers broke, and she's going to be out of action 4 months. and we'll have to go into dry dock. Very rare for a coupling like that to break, but it does happen. I mean, anything mechanical can break. Might have been put together badly, I suspect. I mean, that would be the main reason it would break, which would not surprise me. But, you know, there we go. Yeah, I got a tune that I want to play, guys, while we're here. And this one is for a friend of mine, and he is a friend of mine, but he gets on my tits occasionally, so yeah. And that one was for my friend Richard. But anyway, Glorious. Marines are pucker mad lads. Yeah, absolutely glorious. The Royal Marine Commando is bloody good. They have a great rivalry with the Parachute Regiment, and the worst punch-up I ever saw in the military was on an exercise in Denmark when I think it was the Paras were attacking some trenches held by the Royal Marines. That was a serious punch-up. They were lucky no one was killed, I think, the way rifle butts were swung about, etc. So, yeah. Do I listen? I don't know that dude at all called the Temper State. Who is he? You need to tell me who he is because I've never heard of him. George has got paranoid schizophrenia, seemingly. But yeah, I think he has a bit, to be honest. But, yeah. I try and keep this little wagon somewhere on the road where it's acceptable and not going to get banned by YouTube, etc. But I have positions that people think are more extreme than they should be, and there are other people who think I'm too moderate. So, you know. Yeah, Para's a bit like that. I tell you, in Aldershot on a Saturday night, mate, which is not a place I would ever recommend anyone going. Don't go to Aldershot on a Saturday night. It wasn't fun even in the 1980s. God knows what it's like now. Actually, it's probably safer now, to be honest. But yeah, the only soldiers who a group of very drunk Paras wouldn't try and pick on were a small group of Gurkha rifle guys who were sitting in the bar there in the sports jackets that they always used to wear back then, quietly having a drink. Even the Paras wouldn't pick on those guys, but everyone else, absolutely fair game. They'd have a go if there was enough of them. But yeah, Aquila Temper State says he's an Anglo-traditionalist pagan. Okay, so is he a bit like Survive the Drive? Because I like Survive the Drive. He's pretty good. 555 says, George, I miss your input. Yeah, I miss George's input too, 555, and I was very sad when he left my Discord. So, you know, totally agree with you on that one. But you know, he left because he wanted to leave, and this is not the military, and I can't tell people what to do. So, you know. Richard has been picking on me about the Gurkhas, would be more accurate, although picking on me is not quite the word. But he basically thinks I prefer the Gurkhas to Anglos, which I don't. I just think they're honorary Anglos, you know, that's all it is. So there's that. Oh, simple pirate. You're so, what's the word? You're so cruel and unfair. You haven't missed George, honestly. Well, actually, I had a mate in the Royal and he was a nice dude. And he certainly wasn't one to run, I've got to say. He was also quite a big fella. So, yeah. So I'm not sure about that one, right? But yeah, I had a mate in it who was right. He was actually a nice bloke, but yeah. Oh, we're getting nasty in the chat here now, boys. Calm down. Calm down. So yeah, Aquila Tempestate. If that dude is anything like Survive the Drive, I might like him because I think Survive the Drive's got an excellent job. I am not one of these people who is anti-pagan. I think that we have so many enemies on the real right, on the dissident right, if you prefer. We have so many real enemies that we cannot afford to bicker and argue about whether someone's a Christian or whether they're a Catholic or a Protestant, or even if they're a pagan or an agnostic even. Like I used to consider myself an atheist. I don't. I call myself an agnostic these days, which is I don't know in terms of God. I don't know because I don't. That's probably as far as I'll ever go, but I'm not at all anti people who are Christians or religious in other ways. I'm not. True enough, Cardamom, and also they have a sense of humour, which is also not true of many of these aliens. God's Own Prototype, good to see you, mate. Always nice to see you around. You've been following the channel for a long time. So yeah, understand though, Cardamom, like when I talk about people who have served in the Royal Gurkha Rifles of the British Army, I'm not talking about all Nepalese, not at all. I'm talking about people who've actually served in the Royal Gurkha Rifles. Those dudes, as far as I'm concerned, are honorary British. Yeah, I'm not at all surprised that Grinder Greg was pretty cringe. I mean, you know, bum fucking your way to white purity isn't going to work, in my opinion, but, you know. And I would have supported Colette over that one too, because I think Colette's opinion on the Ukraine war is more accurate than Greg's is. As I was saying earlier, God's Own Prototype, all the people I hate and detest support Ukraine. Like every globo, homo, feminist person you can find in the world supports Ukraine. All of them. It should really tell you something. When your enemies all support something, maybe it's time you don't. And I prefer Mark. Look, I think Mark Collette could quite possibly be a British government plant of some description. I don't know that, but I think it's perfectly possible. But you know what? Compared to Grinder Greg, and Grinder Greg got his nickname for a good reason, chasing young boys in third world nations. Compared to Grinder Greg, I prefer Mark Collette anytime you like. And I have considerable differences with Collette on politics, but I still prefer him over Grinder Greg. Because at least he's a straight white guy. Yeah, look, the Duran, I like the dude from Cyprus with the beard, who's relatively right-wing. I think he's all right. I can't stand the supposedly, in inverted commas, English Greek guy who spends most of his time slagging off Britain. Don't like him at all. But the other, who's also quite lefty, I think. But the other dude, the dude in Cyprus, I don't mind him. I sometimes watch his videos. They've all been watching this. Where's everyone else? Says they've all been watching the Grinder Greg video, which Richard in my Discord was trying to get everyone to go and watch, rather than watch my show, because he was pissed off with me for some reason. And for a bloke at 40, he can be quite childish, but there we go. Totally agree with you, Dolores. Exactly. I even said on my Discord, I said, look, if I was in a fire trench and I had a Gurkha with me, I know he would have my back 100% all the time, just like I would have his. I can't say that about every single Anglo-Celtic person I know, sadly. I wish I could, but I can't. Cross Atlantic Fed sandwich. Yeah. Look, I like what Synagogue says. Everyone's a Fed until they prove they're not. Okay. I think that's a very sensible way to go on myself. I also agree with this. From Simple Pirate, Ukraine should make peace before they end up like the Germans in 1945. I totally agree with you. Look, Russia's troops in the Ukraine have been capped at 200,000 men, plus the militias from the Donbass republics. They've done this partial mobilization, which will give them another 300,000 men. Plus, from what I hear, they've got an extra 70,000 volunteers as well. And the West is running out of weapons to send these people. To Ukraine. The West is literally running out of weapons to send to Ukraine. Don't have any. My prediction is by spring at the latest, Ukraine is going to be so far up shit creek without a paddle that they're going to be crying. They're going to be up shit creek without a paddle, because there's going to be so many Russian soldiers there that they can't match, because their losses have been so enormous. So, there you go. To be fair, the selection pool of Gurkhas you've met isn't the same as that of the Anglo-Celts, but the point still stands. Yeah, exactly. Look, it's quite difficult to become a British Army Gurkha rifleman. In fact, it's very difficult to become a British Army Gurkha rifleman. So yeah, they tend to end up with good people. There you go. But yeah. Steve, this is entirely correct. There is no industrial capacity, not even in the United States, to keep resupplying Ukraine. And what you have to remember is that the Ukrainians keep losing these weapons that they give them. And they're not going to get Western tanks. They're not going to get British or German tanks, because Britain and Germany doesn't have enough tanks to give them. And they're not going to get American Abrams tanks, because the Abrams weighs 70 tons, which is far too much for most Ukrainian bridges, and drinks drinks jet fuel, because it's got a jet engine, like it's going out of fashion, and Ukraine doesn't have enough tankers. And America can't give them those tankers either without taking them away from their own forces. So they're not going to get Western tanks. And that is aside from the fact that the Ukrainian tanks have always been ex-Soviet models with a crew of 3 and an autoloader, whereas no Western tank has an autoloader. They all have a member of the crew who loads the shells. And so you would totally have to retrain the crews on that as well. Ain't going to happen. Never going to happen. Yep, totally true, the Laureus. And if you watch Patrick Lancaster's channel, he actually was in those Donbass republics when they were holding the referendums. And the referendums they were holding looked pretty fair to me. And overwhelmingly in favor of joining Russia, because most of those people are Russian descent. And the few Ukrainians who used to live there are fucked off anyway. 555, let me tell you, one of the worst channels on YouTube is Forces TV, which is British Forces TV, paid for by the British Ministry of Defence, i.e. British taxpayers. It is one of the worst channels on YouTube and one of the least accurate. And I'm banned from it because this ex-British soldier used to say too much truth in the comments, so my comments are now banned. No doubt the diversity hire who runs the place thought, oh, well, we can't have any real British soldiers talking about anything, so there you go. French tanks have I have no idea, John Best. I don't pay much attention to French tanks. Are they the ones that have got like 7 reverse gears and 3 forward gears? I'm not sure, to be honest. You know. I'm joking, by the way, John Best. I just don't know. But, you know, a few French tanks, if the French had enough, which they don't, is not going to make any difference to Ukraine. And also the latest French tank is not, the Leclerc, I think it's called, is actually not probably the world's best tank in any case, but there we go. Cardamom, it would take at least a year for the Ukraine. Yeah, it would. And then the bridges can't support them and they don't have the long tail of specialist vehicles you need to operate heavy Western tanks. Like you need loads of blokes who can maintain them. You need specialist bridging units. You need specialist vehicles, usually based on the same tanks, that can tow them out when they're stuck or something like this. You need hundreds of tanker lorries. The Ukrainians don't have any of that. They're not going to get any of that. They're not going to get Western tanks. They're just not. I totally agree with that, 555. But there we go. Bengal says there's no point for Ukraine to throw its youth away over places that don't even want to be Ukrainian. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. If Ukraine had any sense, it would say, okay, we'll keep the bit east of the Dnieper River, west of the Dnieper River, minus the coastline, because Odessa is also a Russian city, and that's where we'll be. And no, we won't join NATO. That's all they need to do. And then they'll retain a rump of their nation. Otherwise, they're going to be totally destroyed. I also agree with this from Bengal. Like, why should we be? Look, the British Army in particular does not have enough weapons. Why are we sending them to Ukraine? We don't have enough for ourselves. And this is also true of all of the European NATO nations, who spend even less than Britain does in proportion on defense. This is why the Americans have such a huge control over Britain and Europe. It's because we're not prepared to pay for our own defense. And apparently Liz Truss and a shitty, crappy chancellor are just about going to make that worse too. So there we go. Yeah, Steve, all that stuff. And also like the REME technicians and what have you that you need to keep the engines and the stuff going, you know? You need to be able to fix the engines. You need to be able to fix the assorted optical systems and all this kind of stuff, you know? And I was an infantry soldier, so what I know about tanks is not a huge amount, but I know a little bit. So yeah, there's all of that going on at the moment. Don't disagree with that, mate, either. I don't disagree with that. I'm pretty sure the Russians would let Ukraine export stuff through a Russian-held Odessa. I mean, like, depending on when they try and negotiate. But if they don't negotiate, they're just going to lose. You know, they don't. It's not a big enough country to fight Russia, even with Western help. And like I said, please realize this, dudes. Even the Americans, Europe, forget about Europe, but the Americans even have run out of stuff to send Ukraine. And Tricky Woo in the chat, entirely correct. Imagine trying to keep the supply lines of tankers to fill an M1 Abrams tank. Even the USA had trouble doing that in Iraq, and yes, they did. The Americans struggled to do it because the M1 Abrams has a jet engine, basically. And it drinks fuel like it's going out of fashion. Not saying it's a bad tank, but it drinks fuel like it's going out of fashion, and it's hugely heavy. The latest ones are about 70 tons, and the vast majority of bridges in Ukraine couldn't even support them. You wouldn't be able to cross the bridge because the tank's too heavy. And even when you're looking at like German Leopard 2s or British Challenger 2s, those things are 60 tons or close to. And although they don't drink fuel quite as fast as the Abrams, they also need a long tail of special support vehicles. And Britain, for example, has a whole total of less than 250 main battle tanks now. How many do you reckon we could afford to send to Ukraine out of the 250 less than 250 tanks we actually have? Not bloody many. And are like 10 or 12 tanks going to make much of a difference to Ukraine? Of course they bloody well not. They've lost hundreds of tanks to Ukrainians. Rory Herbert, fuel supply was a big problem for the Germans in the Battle of the Bulge. Yes, it was. They were relying on capturing American supplies, which they did not do. that was the German plan, in inverted commas, was capture American supply dumps and use their fuel. But they didn't manage to do that. And it's always a stupid plan anyway. You know? If you don't have enough fuel to launch the attack, you probably shouldn't launch the attack. But, yeah. It was a desperate ploy by the Germans that never really had a chance of succeeding and meant that they then didn't have enough reserves to fight the Ruskies on the Eastern Front because they got destroyed in the Battle of the Bulge. The Laureist is entirely correct. This is the military saying. It's been a military saying for many years, and it's a military saying for a reason, because it's true. You can't do tactics if your logistics break down. All right, guys, I'm going to go, unless I get some questions, I'm going to go about another 5 minutes. So if you've got any questions, I'll try and answer them for you. Anything within reason. And if I don't get any, we'll close it down. You can all go back to listening to Grinder Greg arguing with Mark Collette, if he still is, which I'm sure was very fascinating, but I won't bother watching. Carlman, I doubt a couple of extra Panzer divisions would have made a difference. Well, you would have been talking about at least 4 Panzer divisions, and I think that might have made a difference. When the German Army Group Center was absolutely destroyed in 44, it might have made a difference. Yes, I think, but maybe. Glorious, what regiment were you in? I was in the Queen's Regiment, mate. That was what was left of my family regiment, which was the Middlesex Regiment, which was disbanded and amalgamated into the Queen's Regiment, so I ended up joining them. Did I see any action? Well, I did 2 tours in Northern Ireland with the British Army. I did a normal tour, and then I was lucky enough, in inverted commas, to be sent on a Rollman tour where like the married dudes couldn't take their misses and all this kind of stuff. Although actually the Rollman tour wasn't too bad, because we were in South Armagh on the border, and it was a little bit more like real soldiering than Belfast. But I then, when I left the army, because I thought, well, no, this is not going the way I wanted to, and I moved to South Africa and I joined the South African Defence Force, and I was in the South African Defence Force for 7 years. 8 years actually, I think. Now I think about it. But yeah, so I did that, and I saw quite a lot of action there in Southwest Africa against SWAPO. So yeah, I have seen a bit. I still occasionally get little bits of an RPG-7 fragmentation grenade coming out of my back when I have a shower because I didn't duck quickly enough. But that was my fault. So there you go. So yeah. Andy says Grinder Greg lost. Good. I'm glad he did. What do I think of the British Democrats? Anything's better than the so-called Conservatives is what I think of the British Democrats. Valero, good on you, mate. How you going? Nice to see you. Did I become a South African citizen? I've still got a South African passport, mate. Not that I consider South Africa these days as being real South Africa. Carmen, is it true the Afrikaners try to halt further European after their rupture with Britain? It isn't really, no. Like when I moved to South Africa, which was like the mid-1980s, about 40% of white guys in South Africa were English speaking, which means they spoke English at home, and about 60% were Afrikaans speaking, which meant they spoke Afrikaans at home. Although most people of whether they were Afrikaners or English speaking could speak Afrikaans or English. My Afrikaans never rose above absolutely terrible, but there we go. It was the unions who didn't want big European immigration into South Africa, actually, not so much the Afrikaners. I mean, some Afrikaners, I'm sure, who were union guys were against that. But yeah, there was no desire for a big white proletariat in South Africa, which of course came home to bite the South Africans on the bum years later. What have we got here? There we go. I was nearly run over by 4 Leopard 2 tanks. The Leopard 2 is a German tank, by the way, guys. In a Mexi shell or on an exercise crusader during the Cold War. Needless to say, I compromised my position. I'm not surprised. I would have done too. I'm pleased to hear that, Lady of Shalom, because I'm certainly I support Mark Collette's position on that particular subject a lot more than I do Grinder Greg Johnson. But as you can see, I had no guests on here, Lady of Shalom. The support I get from my Discord is wonderful. It really is. It's like it gives me this feeling of British comradeship. How well the people on my Discord support me, because you've got to go off and watch a debate between Mark Collett, who may or may not be some sort of British government asset, and Grinder Greg Johnson, who is trying to purify the white race by bum-fucking his way through various young boys in the third world. Great stuff. Do I think France will leave NATO? I hope they do, because I think NATO should break up, to be honest. I mean, I don't really care if France leaves it or not, but I think NATO should break up. What's it there for these days, other than supporting Globo Homo? No worries, Lady of Shalom. I didn't ask you to come and join the stream. I asked 7 people to join the stream, and not one of them did. So there we go. That is what you get for running a British and Old Commonwealth channel. That is what you get for it. No, I'm going to close it down shortly, Viaki. I've been talking for an hour and 20 minutes, which is more than enough for me droning on my own. So I'm not going to keep this going much longer. Yeah, the Laureate, I totally agree. Like, NATO was there to defend against the Warsaw Pact. When the Warsaw Pact broke up, NATO should have stopped. But, there we go. And also, if you break up NATO, who knows? European countries, including Britain, might actually start building up realistic defense forces that they haven't had for years, because it's cheaper to rely on the Yanks. Well, look, Lady Ishala, I'd just say this, right? We talk about globo homo, don't we? Right? And Greg Johnson's a homosexual. So I'm not surprised he's shilling for NATO and Ukraine, to be honest, because, that's where all the rainbow flags are, and keep going. Globo homo empire, It's like, why is anyone surprised at this, really? What I can't work out is how people think Greg Johnson's really on the right, but, whatever. The West, I've been saying this on this stream, and I don't suppose anyone's bothered listening to it because they were all listening to that crap, but the West does not have any more weapons to give to Ukraine. Not even the Americans have many more weapons they can give to the Ukraine, because they're not going to take them off their own forces, which is the only way they can do it. I mean, I see the latest thing is, the West is going to send Ukraine air defense weapons, right? They're going to get very few of them, and a lot of them are not going to arrive for a year and a half or 2 years, and by then they will have lost. Yeah, that could even be true, Carlman. And that could be true too. I mean, I don't know at this stage, what's the difference between Greg Johnson and Richard Spencer? I mean, they seem very similar, and they say the same things about Ukraine and stuff. And I have my doubts about the sexuality of Richard Spencer, but, I'm not trying to be homophobic, of course, because that would get me closed down by YouTube. Although apparently, homosexuality and trannies and all the rest of it is great with loads of people on the right. That doesn't surprise me in the least. That does not surprise me in the least. I think Spencer and Greg Johnson are both trying to edge their way back into normality, if you see what I mean. And I think Grinder Greg is just doing it a bit more slowly. But I'm told I mustn't punch riot, because apparently these people may help us. How Grinder Greg or Richard Spencer is going to help us, I'm not too sure, to be honest. Because they just seem to want more American empire. But, that's just me. God's own prayers up. I think Lady of Shalott already said that Mark Collette won the debate. If America goes to war with China over Taiwan, then Britain, Australia, and Japan definitely will as well. Yes. Britain, Australia, and Japan all will. For sure. 100%. My thoughts, Rory Herbert, on Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor is his name in rhyming slang is entirely accurate. And he was a Remainer pro-EU guy, just like Truss herself. So, Britain is in a mess. I wanted to do a stream tonight with some guests talking about the absolute mess that Britain is in at the moment, but I couldn't get any guests because they're all busy watching a gay guy arguing with a possible British government asset. So, there you go. One can only do so much. Like, I honestly think that the people in the dissident right, or the real right, as I really prefer to call it, are their own worst enemies. We spend far more time jabbing at each other than we do attacking our real enemies. But then I don't think Grinder Greg is really on the right. Certainly not when he supports NATO and the US against Russia. How is he really on the right? He's like totally global homo as far as I can see. Totally agree with you, the Laureate. I really do largely agree with that. No, Charles won't say that. I don't think. I mean, in theory, he could, but I don't think he will. But I do think the backroom boys in the Conservative Party prefer Sunak and Mordaunt. And there is a possibility that may happen. I mean, from my point of view, that would just be changing shit for crap. So, I don't really care, to be honest. Bengal says, what's the good reason for supporting NATO? Look, as I said, look who supports Ukraine in this war with Russia. And every single person I hate and detest politically, every single one of them, whether they be lefties or feminists or LGBTQ types or corporate globalists, all of those people support Ukraine. So anyone on the right who can't see that supporting Ukraine is a fake position because all your enemies are supporting Ukraine is an idiot, in my opinion. Just an idiot. Every single person I hate and detest in the world supports Ukraine. Tomb of Arminius, absolutely right. Neo-libs and neoconservatives all support Ukraine. All the neocons support Ukraine. If Christopher Hitchens were alive today, he'd be absolutely banging the drum for Ukraine, just as he was banging the drum for the invasion of Iraq and the occupation of Afghanistan. And didn't they do us a lot of good? The real question is Kanye based. Well, Kanye is a black guy, and he ain't our friend. He might sometimes say something that suits us, but he's not our friend. And anyone who thinks any different is an idiot. Kanye is Kenya's friend, and if he's the friend of anyone, it will be other American black guys. He ain't any of us guys. Yeah, I've been to Iceland. Nice country, nice people. But yeah, you're right. They have no military at all, basically. Yeah, he would be, Bengal. He would be. I was one of those people who many years ago used to think he was a very clever guy. And don't get me wrong, he was quite a clever guy, but his ideology was he went from Trotskyist to neocon, which is actually a pretty common pipeline. A lot of Trotskyists turned into neocons. Funny that. I don't know why people are saying Kanye West is a slave without chains or invisible chains. I don't get that. I'm sorry. He's a millionaire. How the fuck is he a slave? He's far richer than I am. How is he a slave? I'm sorry. Rory Herbert, I never had a JP Morgan Chase bank account. I'm sorry, but a military guy never gets rich. Wish did. If I was rich, I'd be quite happy, but I'm not. Not at all. Yeah, I see your point. No chance of it happening when God's own predator. Yeah, Tim of Arminius, pretty much agree with that. Ron Paul, absolutely true. Yep. Blair, absolutely another example, was a trot at uni and then became a absolute neocon when he was Prime Minister. Of supposed, in inverted commas, New Labour. Uh-huh. Oh, okay, simplify it. I see kind of what you're saying there. I always try my best, mate. I use traditional British music as much as possible on this channel because I like it. And because I hope it helps remind us of who we really are rather than who the corporate globo homo scum that run us these days want to pretend we are. Lady of Shalott making some good points. Yeah, Roger Scruton was a good guy. Totally agree. Look, I have nothing to say about Joel. I don't know him. I am subscribed to his channel. I've been subscribed to his channel for a long time, but I don't know him at all. And I have no opinion on him or his views. I know he's an Aussie. That was the song that we started off with, Andy F. It was Over the Hills and Far Away. It wasn't the John Tams version, though. Although I have played that on this stream before now. But I don't play it these days because I always get a copyright strike when I do. But I have played that. But we did play Over the Hills and Far Away as our opening tune. And our closing tune is going to be Heart of Oak. So there you go. Well, Biarki, I've lived in Australia since 2000. Moved here from South Africa because I met an Aussie chick in South Africa. And I actually like Australians. I think they're generally good people. I'm not saying they all are, because, you know, no people are all good, but the vast majority of real Anglo-Celtic Aussies are good people. Ah, there you go, Biarki. You're taking the piss. Fair enough, mate. Which is another thing that Aussies are good at doing, is taking the piss. So there you go. Have I ever seen Gone with the Wind? I probably have when I was a kid, but as it's a romance story, no, not recently. Like, it was probably on some Sunday when I was a child in the UK on TV. But I've never gone out of my way to watch it. I know it's about the era of the American Civil War, but no, because it's basically a romance thing, and I've got no interest in that sort of shit. Lady of Shalott says, Joel is good on Australian history. Yeah, right. Okay, got no problem with that. I like South Africans. Every white one I met was based and passionate. Yeah, I like most South Africans, to be honest with you, mate. I still have quite a lot of South African mates. So, yeah. English speaking and Afrikaans speaking, by the way. So, yeah. And even one or two Zulu speaking, but yeah, I'll get slagged off by that for some people. Oh, dear. Well, Bjarke, if all those if all those in brackets are what I think they are, you have to remember that South Africa in the 1930s was one of the first countries to offer sanctuary to Jews from Germany. One of the first countries to do it. And when the white government was in power, and I have to admit this, Israel was a big ally of South Africa. The R4 rifle is basically the Israeli Galil. South African there was a South African self-propelled artillery piece, which was basically an Israeli self-propelled artillery piece. South Africa, under the white government, eventually had a nuclear bomb that came from Israel. And what happened was, when the Soviet Union fell in '89, the West, including Israel, totally dropped South Africa. But up until that point, Israel and South Africa were big-time allies. I have to say this because it's true. So, I don't know. There you go. Like, don't get me wrong, guys. I think there is some truth in the JQ and all this kind of stuff. But I think it's mostly in America. It's not as true as that in most other countries. And I'm pretty neutral on Israel, to be honest with you. I don't give a shit about Israel. One way or the other. I don't care about them. So there we go. Well, you say that, and yet the Afrikaner government in the 1930s absolutely did provide them all with sanctuary. So, and the Afrikaner government, that was the white government in the 1980s, was big-time allies with them. Government. That's just historical facts. I can't lie about it. Even to this day, the main rifle of the South African Defence Force, or whatever it's called now, is the R4, which is an Israeli Galil. Go and look. Go and check it up. It's not hard to check. Rory Herbert saying, my uncle, Captain St. John Herbert OBE, was the only person I've ever met who served in both the Royal Navy and the Royal Australian Navy. Actually, certainly up until World War II, it was very, very common for officers to serve in both the Royal Australian and the Royal Navy. Very common. And it was actually not that uncommon for even other ranks to do the same thing. So, yeah. But good on your uncle, for sure. Yeah, Tomb of Arminius. I did point that out, that South Africa, the white government in South Africa ended up with a few nuclear bombs. And the way they got them was via Israel. They destroyed them, by the way, before they handed over to the ANC, thank fuck. But, yeah, that's how they got them. So, although I don't have a dog in this fight, mostly. I just try and tell the truth historically. And South Africa, under the white government in the 1980s, and Israel were allies. But it all stopped, and also the Brits and the Americans also stopped backing South Africa as soon as the Soviet Union fell in '89. And that's the real reason why in 92, everything was handed over to the ANC, who were communists, basically. Simple pirate. What was the British rifle after the Lee Enfield? It was God's own rifle. It was the SLR, which was my rifle when I was in the British Army. 7.62 millimeter SLR. Great rifle. Go through 6 feet of compact earth. And then that got replaced by the absolutely crappy SA-80, which has gradually been improved, but like everyone who can get rid of it has got rid of it by this stage. And of course, the SLR, the self-loading rifle, was, I think it was the L1A1, it was the official designation, if I remember correctly. And that was based on the FN FAL from Belgium originally, but it's a great rifle. Yeah, the A2 was far better than the original SAE. I know that, Valorius. And these days they're bringing in the A3, which is slightly better, but the ergonomics of the SAE are absolutely terrible. And it's also pretty heavy for an assault rifle. And like everyone who can get rid of it has. So like the Special Forces got rid of it years ago, like the SAS and the SBS from the Marines. They got rid of it years ago. The Parachute Regiment Pathfinders got rid of it. All of the Royal Marines have now got rid of it. None of the Royal Marines are going to be using SA-80s anymore. They're all going over to Colt Canada things. And I'm pretty sure that you're going to see the Parachute Regiment getting rid of it more and more as well. I think the Special Forces Support Group, which is really a Parachute Regiment battalion, I think those guys are going to ditch it as well, to be honest. It's ergonomically terrible. It's a reliable rifle, and it doesn't jam and all that stuff. But like the ergonomics of it are just terrible. You see these British soldiers having to bend right over the rifle to do things and all this kind of stuff. No firearm should be designed that way. It's crazy. Well, HK, the Laureus, were the guys who actually made the A2. And at that stage, I'm not sure who owned them. I know, like, they started off as a German company, but I think they were owned by the Brits for a while, but I don't know. Well, in South Africa, the R3, the R4 was basically the Israeli Galil, which is a 5.56 weapon. But the R3 was basically a very similar to the SLR. And I always carried an R3 if I could. I think it's the R3 and the R4, if I remember correctly. A long time ago, boys. But anyway. Was a better target rifle than the SLR. But yeah, it might have been roaring. I don't know. I haven't fired a Leon Ford. I'd like to, but I never have. But I could hit stuff with iron sights at 400 yards with an SLR, which you most certainly couldn't do with a modern 5.56 assault rifle. Yeah, basically that was the problem. Very poor engineering, actually. Very, very poor engineering and very poor quality control was the problems with the SAA. And like I was lucky because they brought that in not long after I left the British Army. So yeah, the Owen submachine gun, mate. It's a submachine gun. It was the better Australian version of the Sten, if you like, but it had a magazine that faced upwards rather than sideways. But yeah, the Owen was an excellent submachine gun. And the Brits used it, by the way, in Malaya after World War II. Quite a lot of British soldiers managed to get hold of owning submachine guns and used them instead of Stens because they were better than the Stens. Yep, pretty much agree with all this firearms talk in the chat. Pretty true. 5.56, I was amazed to find 5.56 won't even always go through a car door. I was watching a demo video, which was actually a British Army demo video for Afghanistan. And 5.56 will not always go through a car door. That's pretty pathetic, to be honest with you. I think it was lack of skill, basically. Britain hadn't produced a rifle for years. And it was, this thing was coming from what was still back then the Royal Small Arms Factory. But they just lost the skilled guys to do this stuff. And it was very poorly engineered and even more poorly quality controlled. And the sad thing is, like, the next British Army rifle is not going to be made in Britain. No chance whatsoever, because we just don't have the engineering people to do it. I have fired a Sterling SMG, Rory Herbert, yes. Which was a good SMG, by the way. Didn't jam. Double feed magazine, good SMG. What's the difference between a submachine gun and a machine gun? Well, traditionally, submachine guns used pistol ammunition. So 9mm for the most part, although some American submachine guns like the Thompson used .45, which again is pistol ammunition, is what the Colt 45 uses. Like a submachine gun uses pistol ammunition. A machine gun uses rifle caliber ammunition, like either something like 303, .30 or 7.62 mostly these days, and will, like, fire out to 800 yards or whatever. Whereas a submachine gun is pretty fucking useless, much beyond 100 yards, because it's firing pistol ammo. I think that's the easiest way to describe it. So submachine gun is an SMG, a machine gun is an MG, but they're totally different, although they both fire fully automatic, if you want them to. Yeah, I mean, look, but basically the two of Arminius, the reason they developed assault rifles, things like the M16 and the SAA, was that you had this 5.56mm rifle that was basically in between a real battlefield rifle and a submachine gun. So you can use it up to, I don't know, say 300 yards maybe. And it can fire fully auto if you want to, although most armies' doctrines, you almost never fire fully automatic. But about the only time you do on most armies' doctrines is if you're trying to put down fire before you fall back or something like that. Yeah, it's an intermediate cartridge, but it's a small cartridge. I mean, the 5.56 is basically a 2.2 round, really. It's got more oomph behind it because it's got more. It's got more cordite in the cartridge, but it's basically a 2.2 round, really. Faust, my friend. Well, at least you're not saying you hate England, although I dare say you will next. But yeah, I need to get you back on a stream at some stage, Faust, please. The Laureus, yeah, that's true, but it's got to be on like a mount, not on its normal bipod. If it's on a tripod mount, yeah, it can do that. But you have to change the barrel quite a lot because it's air cooled. But yeah. I tell you what, I really think people on the right have got to differentiate between the American government of senile Joe Biden and whoever controls him and all that Globo Homo neocon shit, and average American people who aren't like that at all. I know a lot of Americans who are good people, but they're not running the American government, obviously. But then, you know, I detest Liz Truss and all the people who run the British government, and I'm a Brit. Are you going to say all Brits are bad because Liz Truss is twat? You know? Lady of Shalott is correct, as she often is. The global American empire is not ordinary American people. No, it's not. I've actually fired an AK-47 quite a few times. Some of my troops even used to use them in South Africa. Yeah, it's a great rifle. One of the great things about it is like it's very tough. You don't have to keep it that clean for it to fire all the time you want it to fire. And as an NCO said to me when he was first describing it, and he was showing us one that the Brits had captured in Malaya in the 1960s, I think. And he said, yeah, this is a great rifle. It's absolutely suited to any mission trained savage, which it is. It's a very tough, hard wearing rifle, which will almost always fire. Although don't forget that, like the Russians don't use the AK-47 anymore. These days they use the AK-74 and later stuff, which is a 5.56. I think it's 5.56, but it's a smaller caliber, more modern rifle. And like I think if you go to channels like Forgotten Weapons and what have you, and these real firearm channels, most of them will say, like, you know, if you're going to get a rifle these days, it's a toss up between some version of an M16 and an AK-74. So, you know. Yeah, it was a good design, it really was. Faust, mate, who do you support in Ukraine? Do you want the Russians to win or the Ukrainians? This is what I would like to know. And I do want to get you back on my stream at some stage, please. But yeah, I'd like to know, who do you support in Ukraine? Do you support the Russians or the Ukrainians? Or are you entirely neutral? Which is also a possibility, I suppose. Yeah. See, in theory, I'm entirely neutral, but I have to be slightly pro-Russian because everyone I hate and detest supports Ukraine. That's my view, anyway. the thing is, fellow Athelwood, that up until after the First World War, there were really no rules in Britain against owning firearms. There really weren't. Like, and if you want to improve that, go and read Sherlock Holmes stories where either Sherlock Holmes himself or Dr. Watson will very often take their revolver on a particular case. There were no rules really against owning firearms in the UK until after World War One, and that's a fact. To not have a war, yeah, absolutely. I'm like not in favour of wars. I was a soldier. You'll almost never find a soldier in favour of wars, but there we go. But if you're going to have one at the moment, and you look at the people supporting Ukraine, they are every single person I hate and detest supports Ukraine. That's why I don't. Yeah, the provisional IRA in Northern Ireland ended up with quite a lot of M16s because of the plastic paddies in America and NORAD, etc. But yeah, there we go. That happened. But everyone you hate and detest would support any nation that was invaded. No, this is not true, Flaxo. I don't remember anyone I detest supporting Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya or Serbia. I don't remember anyone supporting those countries when they were attacked and invaded. And as for the Falklands, that's British territory occupied by British people. So absolutely, I would support people who hated and detested that. Indeed, I did at the time. I joined the army 1 year after the Falklands War. So, actually a bit less than 1 year after the Falklands War. But yeah, so I don't get what you're trying to say there, Flaxo, at all, to be honest. Yeah, NORAD, plastic paddies in America. There were even some of them who were so stupid that they were actually Protestants and didn't realise the difference. But yeah. Fellow Athelwood. Yeah, I could maybe see that. I don't know. Depends how the progressive stack works, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe. Not all of them, mate. I had American mates in the South African Defence Force, and Canadian mates, and Australian mates. So, yeah, not all of them. I would just laugh at that if it ever happens. I hope it does. Yeah, Fast, I'll send you an email, mate. We'll do a stream for sure. Did they really? They would have been most ill-advised to do so, but okay, you say so. Flaxo, you look like a bit of a fed to me, mate. Corbyn and the Muslim Council of Britain want to stop arming Ukraine. Do you like Corbyn and the Muslim Council of Britain? I detest Corbyn, and I even more detest the Muslim Council of Britain. But you know what? Yes, I want to stop arming Ukraine. So, like I said, Flaxo, you're looking very Fed posty there to me, mate. Who do you work for, son? Well, you heard lies then, Faust. That's what you heard. Because the parachute regiment did no war crimes in Northern Ireland. So there you go. This is even quite entertaining at the moment from the chat. Yeah, entirely correct, Laureist. Britain is not a Muslim country, and they should all fuck off to wherever they came from. I think this is the longest stream I've ever done on my lonesome. I don't really like doing streams on my own, but anyway. Some truth in that. Fast, honestly, man. You're such a Netherlands nationalist. It's funny. Who won the War of 1812? Well, Britain did, really, obviously. Because by the end of it, 3 American invasions of Canada had been defeated, which was the real reason the Americans started the war. You know, all that sailors' rights stuff was bollocks. America started the war because they thought they could take over Canada. And 3 American invasions of Canada were defeated by the Canadians and the British Army. And also by the end of the war, every single American warship in the whole world was either blockaded or captured. Every single one. So I guess the Brits did, really. But then you had that nonsense in New Orleans, which was actually fought after the peace treaty had been signed. So there you go. Yeah, mate. Look, I don't think I'm capable of doing long streams on my own. There are people who can, but I'm not one of them. All I'm doing here is just like interacting with the chat, to be honest. And I'm doing that mainly to fuck off some people in my Discord who've been prats all day. So there you go. So who got this long sentence? Lady of Shalott, who got this long sentence? I'm sorry, I've lost the thread here. Alex who? Roy Herbert, having been in, I expect the phrase Soweto to see the whites of their eyes. Do you know what, mate? I resigned from the SADF when they wanted to put my unit, which was mostly black African soldiers, to be honest. I was a platoon commander in that as an NCO. And I resigned from it when they wanted to put us in the townships because I wasn't interested in shooting our own people. So I don't totally agree with that. What I would say, someone from the SADF would say, is stuff about rum and coke. A lot of guys would say stuff about that because we drank a lot of rum and coke, for fuck's sake. But yeah, all right, whatever. Oh, yeah, Lady Ashore, Alex Belfield, I have seen that. Yeah, look, I don't totally agree with Alex Belfield for a lot of things, but the sentence he got was absolutely ridiculous. Like, he got longer than a lot of these Pakistani, mostly Pakistani, so-called, in inverted commas, grooming gangs, which is to say Pakistanis who rape and beat up white English schoolgirls. They get less than that. So yeah, absolutely agree with that. Yeah, Lady Ashore, they did. It was a total con job. I mean, look, I don't think he helped himself by defending himself in court, but it was still a ridiculously harsh sentence for what amounted to like talking to someone on the internet, really. Simple Pirate, you won your independence. Well, you did, but then don't forget that when America won their independence, they also had the French fighting for them, Spanish fighting for them, and Faust being in the chat, the Netherlands also fighting for them. So Britain was fighting not just the Americans, but the French, Spanish, and Dutch as well. And also half of the British political types, because the Whigs in England basically supported, the Whigs in Britain, I should say, basically supported the Americans. And even there were British generals and admirals who wouldn't serve against the Americans. So yeah, bully for the Americans. Okay then. Yeah, well, that explains a lot, doesn't it? Really? What Lady of Short says there in the chat, I'm guessing. Says quite a lot. What's this dude going to do? He's going to compile the best of Iron Duke go-off moments for you to play with. Nobody can get more. Go for it, friends. Go for it. Bengal, we could never have all been Vikings because the Anglo-Saxons, under Alfred the Great, repeatedly defeated the Vikings. So, there you go. Not once, not twice, but many times. But only for a while, Cardamom, because a lot of Whigs were pro-French Revolution. And there were even a fair number of Whigs who were pro-Napoleon. So only for a while. And I see you've got the Dragon of Wessex as your avatar. So, yeah. All right, gents. I think this has probably gone on long enough. And I'm not so fond of my own voice that I want to hear it for much longer. So unless anyone has any final questions, I'm going to close out the stream. When did the Anglo-Saxons come to Britain? The initial Anglo-Saxons coming to Britain were invited there by the Romano-British Celts as warriors after the Romans left. When the Romans left, they didn't feel able to defend themselves, so they invited the Anglo-Saxons and the Jutes in as warriors to help defend them. That's when the first Anglo-Saxons came to Britain. So, like, very early in the Dark Ages. Fair enough. I'll take your word for that, Cardamom, but I've always seen it described as the Dragon of Wessex. But yeah, okay, maybe it's the Wyvern. Fair enough. But yeah, that's when the first Anglo-Saxons came to Britain. And later on, yeah, there was warfare and no doubt raiding for women and all this kind of stuff, which always goes on when that happens. But yeah, I've got an Anglo-Saxon Christian name, so there we go. All right, boys, I'm going to play us out with you.
Cheer up, my lads, 'tis to glory we steer, to add something more to this wonderful year. To honor we call you as free men, not slaves, for who are so free as the sons of the waves? Hearts of oak, our ships, jolly tons on our men, we always are ready, steady, boys, steady. We fight and we conquer again and again. We never see our foes, but we wish them to stay. They never see us, but they wish us away. If they run, why we follow and run them ashore. For if they will fight us, what can we do more? Hearts of oak are our ships, jolly tars are the men, we always are ready, steady, boys, steady. We fight and we conquer again and again. We'll still make them feel and we'll still make them feel, and draw them on shore as we draw them at sea. Then cheer up, my lads, within one heart let us sing. Oh, soldiers, oh, sailors, oh, statesmen and kings, heart of oak are our ships, jolly tars are our men, we always are ready, steady, boys, steady. We fight and we conquer again and again.
Okay, that was, of course, the famous Royal Navy tune, Hearts of Oak. Back in the days when we had iron men and wooden ships. Thanks very much for watching the stream, folks. And I will see you next week, whether or not I have any guests, because I don't really give a fuck about any of these bastards if it really comes down to it. Because I'm an Englishman and can do myself on my own if I have to. Go well, guys. See you next week.